Yeah, that part. Yay. So we're just right at our time for once. It's amazing. We are on time, which means that we'll go ahead and get started, but we will certainly expect that other people are going to be joining as we go. So don't worry as that kind of continues. And we, Callie, can you let those folks in? Yeah, perfect. So I'll get us started and we'll be rolling. So welcome, and especially welcome to our Facebook community. So welcome to the EAMH and EAL Resource Network Facebook pages live panel discussion. We are going to be exploring equine assisted learning today in this first panel on the topic. There's going to be at least one more, if not an additional one. So over the past few months, we've been really delving into the differences between equine assisted learning and equine assisted mental health. And we started off the discussion series, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago, with some great panels that are available for you guys to check out. That we're sort of looking at the differences from like a 10,000-foot view, so kind of big picture. And now what we're doing is really digging deeper into understanding the nuances of these different services and really learning about those or exploring those nuances with practitioners, people that are out there in the field doing the work. And so we're really excited to continue having these conversations and just learning more and more as we go through these different live discussions, and today's included and the ones to come. So if you're not familiar with the EAMH and EAL Resource Network Facebook page, our aim is to create a safe and welcoming space for people from all backgrounds and walks of life to share, brainstorm, discuss, problem solve, and learn together in community. So Jane Faulkner, maybe just raise your hand. Jane is from the Equine Assisted Therapy Australia organization, and she is one of our moderators. And our other moderator is Callie Walsh. Raise your hand over there, Callie. And myself, Leif Hallberg. So we are your moderators both here on these live discussions and also back on our Facebook group. Couple little teeny pieces of housekeeping for today's call and all future calls that you join us on. Make sure to keep yourself muted throughout the panel discussion. That's really important because it's super annoying when there's that background noise, hard to concentrate. So make sure to keep yourself muted. Use the group chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen to make comments and ask questions of our panelists. Callie will be keeping track of that and monitoring these questions as we go, and she'll help us pull in some of those questions for the Q&A, but she'll also help pull those questions back over to the Facebook group for continued discussion after we are finished with our panel. Okay, so now with no further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Jane, who will introduce our panelists, guide us through a brief grounding and centering, and then get the conversation started with the questions. So thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Leif, and welcome everybody. So to start with, I'm going to introduce Lynn Baskfield. She holds her master's degree in human development and is a coach, author, and owner of Spirit Dance Coaching located in the US. Lynn has been offering equine assisted services since 1997. Lynn, do you mind just giving everybody a wave? Thank you. And then we have Judy Brightman. She is a coach with over 30 years experience in global consulting firms and corporate groups in leadership development and assessment, change management, and team building. She operates her equine assisted coaching practice, Horse Mindful Leader, out of Australia. Judy, could you give everyone a wave? Thank you. And then we have Dr. Blair McKissick. She holds her master's degree in education and has a PhD in applied eco-psychology. Blair is also an outreach specialist for the Military Family Research Institute at Purdue University and the Director of Education and Research at Strides to Success. She's located in the US as well. Blair, if you could just give us all a wave. And then we have Claire Mission. She is an equine facilitated learning practitioner and coach, senior LEAP practitioner, fellow of the ACCPH, and founder of the Equine Assisted and Facilitated Practice Network. And Claire can be found in the UK. So to start with, like we've done every other session, I'm just going to invite you all to do what supports you to settle and to come into your kindest, wisest self. So that whether that is that you look around your space and you find something that feels really good to look at, and you take a few moments just being with that thing that feels good to look at. So for me, there's a beautiful tree through the window in front of me that I'm just looking at. Maybe you start to notice your breathing. Can you just notice the inhale and the exhale? Maybe you start to notice your feet on the floor and your bones on the chair. And maybe you notice how that chair supports you, how you can rest your back into the chair. Maybe you notice how your body is naturally supporting you. Maybe you're holding your hands in your lap or your legs are crossed. You're just taking some moments, noticing how your body is supporting you to be here and allowing yourself to really settle. For us, these conversations are really important, and we feel they can only happen when we create a really safe space. And I guess to create a safe space, we need to acknowledge that we all come from different backgrounds. We see things through our own unique lenses, and that we are a really diverse community, which to me makes diversity brings health. So it's really important that if you make any comments or questions, you just check in before you ask those questions or make those comments. You make sure you get curious about how this might land in the other. It's really important we're really kind to our panelists. I mean, we are very grateful that they are here. They're offering their time, they're offering their experience, their knowledge. So please be mindful that they are humans on the other end of this screen, and that all of us are doing our best, and that as a field, we're all trying to grow and learn, and we can only do this if we have these conversations and we're able to explore different points of view. So now I might start telling you what our questions are for the day. So the first one that we've asked our panelists to consider, and what we've asked is just our panelists to pick out the important pieces to talk to. So the first question is to describe for our audience your EAL practice. What goals do you address and don't address? What populations are served and not served? How do you screen participants? Just going to ask you to make sure you've muted your end. How do you screen participants to make sure you're getting people who are fit for your services? What's the role of the horse and other support staff? That's our first question. That's many questions in that first question. The second question, what makes your service importantly, uniquely different from EAMH? The third question, what are signs or how do you know if the service is moving outside the scope of EAL? And what do you do to maintain safety within your scope of practice? When might you choose to refer out to a different provider type? And our fourth question, what kinds of training and continuing education do you recommend for people interested in or already providing EAL? So Lynn, Judy, Blair and Claire, who would like to start? I should have asked you all this before.
The hot spot. Who's taking the hot spot?
And again, thank you so much for being here and for being in the hotspot. So appreciate it. Claire, is that you saying you are okay to go first? Oh, Judy? Judy or Claire?
I'm going to say if no one else puts their hands up, I will. But
Is that okay with you, Claire? Yeah.
let Claire go. She wants
No, you go. Thanks, Judy. You go straight ahead.
Right.
Thank you.
So welcome, everybody. My practice is really focused around helping people grow vertically, so transformation-wise, they're looking for in their life particularly, rather than just horizontally. So horizontal growth is just layering skills on top of each other, which we do a lot with children when I did work with children in EAL. But vertical growth is kind of giving people new experiences that enable deeper self-awareness and insight. So I work with adults in personal and professional development in both groups and individual sessions. So a lot of the work I do on the personal development side might involve a lot of reflective exercises. I'm a somatic coach. I bring Qigong, mindfulness, Reiki, other energy healing modalities and my shamanic practice and animistic rituals into that work. So it could look quite different ways depending on how I'm working with people. Individually, I will tend to do more reflective work and only with the horses. So, you know, the horses provide such wonderful feedback to people about how they're showing up in their inner state, as well as their posture and how those meet. From a professional development perspective, I might do more active work, you know, where people are actually engaging with the horses with a halter and doing some leading and those kind of exercises. Those are typically groups. So I don't, apart from our initial discussions with the corporate, you know, a lot of people that come in groups, corporate groups haven't chosen to be there. So you always have to be mindful of that in that kind of practice. And we need more support because they're typically bigger groups. I work alone unless I am facilitating larger personal development groups, say more than 6 or so people, when I'll have a co-facilitator or support. If I'm working with corporate groups, there is at least one other leadership equine assisted facilitator and 2 horse support people who are there to keep an eye on the horses' welfare more closely and be in with the horses and people and from a safety perspective all the time, because I may be outside facilitating the conversation around, you know, unpacking and debriefing with others. So I guess those are the core populations that I serve, and people are typically coming because they want to grow, or there is, you know, for individuals, there's a pattern in their life that they want to shift. So I'm looking at what's going on in the present and what goes forward. I'm not digging into the past. The horses, I mean, really all of the work that I do pretty much, apart from the work that I do with riders and their own horses and mentoring practitioners in the EAL space, I could do all of that without the horses, but the horses bring the magic for me. They help people become present and more mindful more quickly. Their non-judgmental, non-verbal feedback just helps people gain insight and awareness without, you know, the language, and helps them tune into those other senses, their interoceptive awareness, their sensations, their emotions, these kind of things, which typically the people I work with are not paying a lot of attention to. So it's really, you know, helping them get more embodied in the leadership corporate environment. It's leadership presence and learning, you know, connection, the power of the pause, somatic techniques to help them set the emotional tone with their own teams. And I do that in various ways on an individual basis with people, as well as doing group works in rituals for nature-rich rituals, bringing in my shamanic and animistic practice. So that's really a summary, I guess, of what I do. The horse, I've talked a little bit about that and what that looks like and support people. So I'll just talk about what makes my practice different and unique. I think what makes every single practice different and unique is what we bring from our own lived experience, our training, and the tools, you know, that we've gathered over the years. And I think that makes every single offering unique. Where does it differ to equine assisted mental health practices? It is more future focused. People that come to me are, you know, are typically able to self-regulate, but very often unaware of their stress levels, their interoceptive, you know, sort of state, not paying attention to the body. So the focus is on that, but not digging into past trauma or past stories. So that's the key difference there. In terms of signs when it's going outside, I don't see it too often, but I have seen it, and I have seen it, you know, in corporate groups too. I mean, emotional release and tears are common, and that's healthy and good. But if people are showing signs of hyper or hypo-arousal, then I need to get in there and contain it quickly. I do that by trying to direct their awareness, reorientate them to the present, to something that is going on in, you know, with the horses or a tree. If it's in a group, I will definitely shield them from the rest of the group. And I will have my co-facilitator, you know, I always have a signal for something like that. We'll, you know, contain and then redirect attention. I will follow up at the end of a session or the end of a workshop to check in with someone and make sure they're safe to travel and that they have support. Part of my intake is, you know, kind of checking with people, usually a 20 to 30 minute conversation with individuals as to what their needs and wants are and whether at that stage I feel I'm the right person. If not, I'll refer them on then. And if someone comes to me and has a session that, you know, seems to trigger them and it's clearly, you know, they need help from a qualified mental health practitioner, then I will contain them and reorient them and make sure that they're okay and safe. I will follow up with them later. I will make sure that they are helped.
Judy.
Thank you. So yes, it's in my intake form, it's there. And even if, you know, on the one occasion that's happened with a corporate group, then obviously I followed up with the internal support person there within that corporation. But I always follow up. After every session, I follow up with people because things bubble up later, as we know. So that was sort of signs of going outside. In terms of ongoing training, the thing I think that we as facilitators of equine assisted learning must do is create a safe space and be able to hold that space for everybody involved. To do that, we need to really develop our interoceptive awareness. We need to develop good embodied presence, and we need to do deep self-awareness work. You know, we need to have done our shadow work, know what triggers us, done all of this, and it's an ongoing thing. You can never tick the box, it's never done. But we need to be very aware of that. So anything that helps deepen that awareness, to me, is some of the key things that we need to bring to be safe facilitators of this work. Obviously, if you're going to work with groups, you should have experience in or training in or learn something about team dynamics, group dynamics. That's really important. Ongoing self-education and attendance of seminars, trainings, whatever, around the horse care, equitation science, ethology, you know, all of those things. Any one of us in whatever place should be continually learning there. And then I think, you know, I've attended a number of different models of equine assisted services training. And I think, you know, the more that you can do yourself, the better, because you can bring in different tools and see different lenses and see how things go. So I'm not wedded to a model. I bring in all the experiences that I've had from everywhere to my practice, and that's what I'd recommend.
Perfect timing. You're amazing. On the nose.
Thanks so much, Judy, and thank you so much for covering so many points. That was really great. Claire, did you want to go step in next? Or Blair or Lynn, is there a preference?
I mean, I can go next. I don't care.
Sure. Yep, that'd be
Claire
great.
trying to get her audio on.
Yes.
I didn't want to jump in front of her.
I've just managed to unmute. Right.
Claire, do you want to
It's
go
alphabetical.
ahead, or do you want me to go?
I'm happy to go ahead. Absolutely. I don't mind at all. First thing I'd like to say is,
I'm starting the timer, okay?
yeah, so am I. First thing I would like to say is it's a real privilege to be here, and thank you, Leif, for inviting me. I really appreciate it, because I think in many respects I'm a little, if I say I'm a little bit of an oddity, it's not just because I'm British, it's because I bring the network with me as well. So in terms of my practice, for a long time I had a herd of horses that I worked with. I now operate a more, what I would call peripatetic practice or model, where I will step in and do programs and then step out and not do programs. So my background, and it's interesting to talk about different models, with my network hat on, I will never ever say any model is better than another one, because they aren't. But my background is EGALA, EHAE and LEAP. I'm a senior LEAP practitioner in the UK. And I am EFL, and I've always understood the difference between EFP and EFL, because thanks to the EGALA model, it's made very clear to you what you bring to that team in terms of working with a therapist. So I've been very lucky over the years to have found a therapist who I've worked with consistently over a long period of time. And when we work together, it's accepted that it's probably therapy. And when I work individually, it's most definitely learning. And I'm very clear on that boundary. And I think that's an area we all need to be very aware of, because there are people who are not clear on that boundary and are in danger of overstepping the mark and potentially de-skilling themselves. So collectively, I think we have a responsibility to ensure that people understand the difference. So the community that I tend to work with now is mainly young people, and I love it. I absolutely love it. They come with all number of presenting issues. We get huge amounts of paperwork about them, and then we get them out into the field with the horses, and quite often don't see what we've been told. They come with anxiety, isolation issues, ADHD, autism, and I don't know how it is perhaps in Australia or in America or other countries, but as a result of the pandemic, the anxiety levels, particularly in young people, has increased dramatically. And so what we're trying to teach them are, I don't want to call them life skills, although they probably are in many respects, but it's how to emotionally regulate and to introduce some social skills which will help them manage that anxiety or that stress or that isolation issues that they've been suffering from, which quite often cause the behavioural problems that you know, then people go, oh, you know, he or she is behaving like this, there must be something wrong with him. And actually, that's not always entirely true, to be fair. In terms of how I look at EFL, I was taught and I have learned that I'm not looking at the past. The past is where therapy sits, because whatever's happened in the past is where you are now. Where I'm looking is, where do we go for the future? Where do we go now? So potentially more goal or objective oriented, but certainly the role of the horse within that is critical, because the way I start a session and other people who I work with start a session is very much the observation, and we call it open, engaged and curious. So, okay, we're looking at the horses. What do we see? Because everything we do needs to be related to the horses, their behavior. Do they want to be with the client? Do they want to be with the group? Do they not want to be? I'm sure we've all had horses who've said, sorry, today's not your day, and tomorrow doesn't look good either. And that's okay. And I think, you know, one of the things that Judy touched on was about horse welfare and how we ensure the safety of the horse, because there is that triangle, which is horses, client, practitioner. For me, the horses have to come at the top, and their welfare is absolutely critical to how they're able to engage and help and support a client in whatever that client is going through. I'm sure you've all heard about it. It used to be called the 5 freedoms. It's now the 5 domains. And certainly it's something as a network that we support in terms of what the horse's needs are and how they should be able to behave, interact and live their lives, whilst obviously being asked to engage in the work that we do with them. One of the things that I've learned over the years is actually less is more. And there are some fantastic activities that you can do. And I use some activities myself, but actually the freedom of being out with the horses and having the horses at liberty and people being able to choose is a really powerful learning experience for a client. Or certainly that's what we've found. I think one of the critical things for me in terms of when do I know I need to refer is when I listen to my own instinct, my own gut, my own voice, internal voice, when it says to me, you can't help this person, you need to refer. So I think it's very important that as practitioners, we learn to listen to our internal voice and not go, well, actually, you know, I could have this person for an hour a week and I'll just take the money, because that's actually not helping anybody, and ethically and morally that's inappropriate. So I think there needs to be an increased awareness for people about when you know something is not right, when you know you can't take somebody further. And I can give you an example. I was working with a young girl and it became very obvious after a couple of sessions that unless she and her family dealt with what had happened in the past, they weren't going to be able to move forward in the future. So I referred her to a colleague, and after a couple of sessions with that particular person, everything became very clear. the young person moved schools, and actually the relationship ended. She didn't need us anymore because she'd worked it out. For me, that's absolutely critical, that practitioners recognize when they're done with their job and they need to get somebody else involved.
About a minute, Claire. You got about a minute. Yep.
So brilliant, thank you. So with regard to sort of CPD and everything, I think mentoring, supervision, critical. If there's a new practitioner, you can shadow a more experienced practitioner, fantastic. Do as much as you can. Look at people like Lucy Rees and Debbie Busby, understand horse behaviour. You know, there's so many things. I mean, the EFPN, obviously we have our conference every other year. We run development days for practitioners, so it's peer-on-peer support. All of those things, you know, waterhole rituals, going online. You'll certainly in the UK, local authority will do safeguarding training online. You can just sign up for it. All of those things are critical because, you know, CPD, the clue's in the words, isn't it? Continuing professional development, so that we don't stand still, we don't assume we know everything, and we keep on learning. So that's me.
Perfect.
Missing out.
Dead on. You guys are good.
Thanks so much, Claire, and thanks for naming that this is a collective responsibility, and just to be your thoroughness around referral and continuing professional development. That's so important. Thank you. Lynn or Blair, would you like to?
I can go.
Thanks, Blair.
Okay, no worries.
I'm starting your timer, Blair, at 8 minutes here, and then I'll give you a 2-minute warning.
Thank you, Lee. Okay. Thank you guys for having me, by the way. This is fun. And I totally enjoy the active discussion around this topic. And, you know, I want to start off by saying that what we do at Strides to Success, my partner's Debbie is on the call. But what we do at Strides is very different, and we know that it's unique. So I want to make sure I just kind of set that from the very beginning. We are unique in that we have equine assisted learning staff, mental health staff, and recreation therapists all under the same roof. And so it's all incorporated into the work that we do, though there are very different services. And we're also a teaching facility, and we also do research. So again, it's a little bit more of a unique situation in that there is direct service, there's research, and there's professional development that are all part of our practice. We operate almost 100% on referrals. We don't, for our direct service, we don't advertise, we don't market. And our referrals come from a couple of pretty common streams for us. The first being educational. So those would come from the schools and from universities who are referring students specifically to develop these life skills related to academic readiness. Maybe they're disengaged. Maybe they're in need of, again, just some of those basic skills so that they can flourish in an academic environment and keep moving forward. The other part of our referrals might come from community healthcare providers, might come from doctors, might come from mental health therapists, those that work within our facility, as well as the ones that work outside of our facility, from group homes and from long-term care or group facilities. Sorry, I'm tripping up on my words, but HR professionals from organizations. We have relationships with the VA and get referrals from them, as well as other rec therapists and behavioral health staff. And we do both one-on-one and groups, though the groups are usually from the same organization. Usually it starts with a phone call. And from that phone call, we try to get as much information about the client as possible to make sure that they are a fit. And we do start off with defining our services, which is that we are not counselors. This is not a mental health service. that the majority of the work that we do is on the ground, and that it is the focus of the relationship between the horse and the human that where the transformation happens. But that's part of that screening tool. A lot of people don't know what they want when they call. They might say, I've been referred to hippotherapy, or I've been referred to equine assisted psychotherapy. And that may not necessarily be what they're looking for, because they don't understand the terminology, or they don't understand the scopes of those different types of services. So we try our best to make sure that we define all of that from the very, very beginning. If it is a referring mental health therapist or other community provider, however, we do involve and create that support network. So they're all involved in the process. When we do the full assessment, that's done in person. And that is a much more client-centered approach when we're doing the assessment. We like to include them in what goals and things that they want to accomplish. What is it that they need? Again, like Claire and Judy have so wonderfully articulated, it is about the present moment forward. We're not there to process the past. That's what they do when they're engaged in therapy. So with us, that's our focus, is on what they need in the present moment and what do they need to be successful for the future. So that is in person. We also make sure that we have all of the ROIs or releases of information and permission to share if we do need to share with the school, or if we need to share with the referring provider. Again, and we understand that that's unique, but that's the way that we've been operating since Debbie started Strides to Success 20 years ago. And it creates that full circle collaborative continuum of care for the people that come in, and it's very customized. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Every person that comes in with a different set of needs and circumstances. So we try to create the experience that best meets those needs. And if it is related to a mental health practitioner, if it's part of that services, we like to think that we work in partnership with them, even if they're not a part of the actual session. And what I mean by that is some of the clients that come to us are not ready for therapy. They're resistant to it, like a lot of the veterans. And so we can provide kind of that soft landing space, build some trust in the space, get them used to the facility, get them used to the staff, and then we can engage them in services. Sometimes it's during therapy. Maybe one of our mental health therapists, the client is stuck. Maybe we have worked with clients who've been in therapy for so long, they begin to tell the therapist what they want to hear, and they've kind of lost their voice. And they might engage us to do some sessions just around finding courage, developing and finding your own voice. And again, trying to gain confidence again in really learning how to express what they need to express. And then they re-engage in services. And then the last would be post therapy. So maybe the therapist says, you know what, it's time. You've learned and processed, and you maybe would like to go and apply what you've learned. So we provide a setting for that transition that they can engage with us. They can really work on applying those skills, again, focused on the present moment and moving forward. But really the connection and the relationship with the horse is the core of what we do. So we may say it's client-centered at the beginning, but as soon as it moves out of the planning phase and into services, that is all about the horse and the human. And again, we make it very clear during that assessment process what the line and scope of our services are. So if we feel like it is moving outside the scope of our services, we're very lucky in that we have built-in mechanisms and pipelines in order to bring in the appropriate care and the appropriate services that that client needs or group. And that looks, for the facilitator, you're going to know when you've hit that line, because you're going to hear the client begin to bring up past experiences. They kind of begin to bring things up. It kind of becomes a pattern, and you start to notice that. They also might disclose something. They might start talking in a way that kind of makes you feel a little bit more uncomfortable or awkward. And it's in that moment that you go, oh, okay. And it doesn't even matter what your individual credential is, it's also your comfort level. You may be fully credentialed to do EAL, and that's awesome. And you've taken all the right classes, but you haven't really developed a whole lot of confidence yet. So your threshold and your barrier there, it might not be as strong as somebody who's been a practitioner for 20 years. And so you know that feeling to say, yeah, it's time. I need to bring in somebody else. A more seasoned professional may know it right away. They may know, hey, you know what, this is outside my scope. Even if I'm a recreation therapist by trade, I know when I'm hitting outside the scope of my practice. I still stay in that present moment moving forward. So you kind of know, you have that gut instinct, but you're also listening for those cues of, again, somebody bringing up the past over and over again, or bringing up a situation, or bringing up something that leads you to believe, okay. And, we tried to make that transition as easy as possible and saying it's really hitting outside of the bounds of what I can help you with. And you might need a higher level of service than I can offer. Or again, if we have a therapist that's already a part of that person's case, then we bring them back in. We don't diagnose and tell them that they need mental health services if they don't have a person working with them. Instead, we might just, again, be very gentle about that. And same thing, Judy, I love the way that you talk about, checking in with them and making sure that they're safe, and, making sure you haven't opened up something that requires that. Again, we're so lucky that we have people on site and we all have that experience.
You got about a minute, Blair.
Sweet. The role of the horse is really the partner in the process, and we do honor that very much. And we do make sure that those 5 domains of that you talked about at horse welfare are a part of it. We call it reorient, redirect, and reset. When you're talking about how we kind of keep reorienting people back to the present. And then as far as training, we focus in on those competencies that are necessary, those equine skills, those human skills, and facilitation skills, because a lot of it is kind of, you see at the waterline, and that's what people are looking for, that level of expertise that you can get maybe in an online class, or that you can get in a short period of time. But it's what happens below the waterline where the real work is. And you can't learn that in a vacuum. You have to learn that practical skills. It takes time to develop. It takes time to get to that depth where the real transformation happens. And it requires mentorship, and it requires time and experience and confidence. And so I think that is imperative to whatever training. So the competencies are a good guideline to judge and make sure that a training program is hitting all of those important parts. But again, knowing that this is a lifelong journey to understand and to be able to get self-regulation and to get your own emotional intelligence to where you can really listen to what the horse is telling you and feeling it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Blair. And thanks so much for just like really, sorry, my word's gone. Making clear how important intake is, and defining services, and just that your centre sounds amazing. So inspiring just that you have all those services there for people. Thanks very much. Lynn, are you ready to go?
Well, hi, everybody. It's really great to be here with you all and be part of this conversation. Yeah, I'll just start in here. I have to say that my work over the years, and I've been in this work for a long time, since the early 2000s, is really a love story. And it's, doing coaching is a second career for me. I got a master's in human development in my 40s and hung out my shingle, but I've been a lifelong horsewoman. So I've done a lot of outdoor experiential education work and horse work, and began to realize that not everybody wanted to ride, but people were interested in self-development, in self-awareness, in being in nature. And so, I started to educate myself in other modalities besides riding. One was EAL. I worked quite a lot with Ariana Strozzi's Coaching and Horses program, learned from Linda Kohanoff and some with Barbara and, all kinds of people. And so I was able to, first of all, the idea was to, make this available to people who just didn't want to ride or couldn't, but then I saw the power of the work. And at first I was like, really, is this for real? So I brought all of my, by this time I had a coaching practice, brought all of my coaching clients out to see the horses. And I actually proved to myself how powerful it was. So I began to wrap at least one horse coaching session into every month of, and usually people coach once a week, that they would come out to see the horses. And most people were very, very open to that. So, that's how I got started and have continued to use a coaching model. So how that, the goals we address in coaching is the client's big agenda, what we call the big agenda with the big A, not the little whiny agenda like, well, I can't do that. I'm stuck. That's why they come in often, is because of being stuck or going through a transition and not knowing where to go next, or, how to come back to what has heart and meaning, those sorts of things. And so we really take a look and keep coming back to what's the client's big agenda. Now, of course, the question of where do the horses fit in, client comes in with what they say their big agenda is, but the horse will say, well, maybe not, with their feedback. And, they're just so attuned to what the underlying concerns are that maybe keep the person from moving ahead in their life. The other thing that people have referred to also around working with EAL or equine assisted coaching is the assumption that people are creative, resourceful, and whole, and that there really isn't anything to fix. Now that doesn't mean there aren't challenges, again, that people don't get stuck, but that with the kind of, what would I say, kind of holding space for their own resourcefulness. And particularly the horse brings that out so beautifully. People can tap into that and come up with their own answers and their own path forward. And they can look at new perspectives and all kinds of things from that place of wholeness. So, yeah, and when I went into this career, I knew I wanted to work with well people. Actually, the dean of my university said, I don't think you want to go into therapy. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in therapy is not well. I've been in therapy myself. I've had things that therapy was perfect for to address there. But like others have mentioned, what we're looking at is going forward. Yes, emotions come up. Yes, feelings and things that maybe are tough come up. But, and that's just part of being human. And the horses will really, again, help that to happen. Sometimes people get in my corporate groups, occasionally somebody's just gotten out of their car and not even come in to see the horses yet, and they'll start crying. It's like, wow, when is the last time I connected with the earth, with being outdoors outside of a cubicle? So, there's just a lot about coming back into the body, as others have touched on. Horses are, as we all know, we're all kind of in this business in one way or another, embodied beings, and that's the locus of where the initial learning is the body. And then we do or don't put it into language afterwards. Sometimes we can put that learning into language, but sometimes it's never languaged, and yet the learning is true and permanent. So, so that's how the horses, you know, they're just integral to the process. As far as therapy clients, sometimes a therapist will refer a client to me, and sometimes someone I will refer out, or someone is already in therapy when they come in. And so I always make sure the therapist knows that the person is working with me and that I have permission from the person to connect with the therapist if needed, and vice versa. And let's see, once in a while, a therapist comes out with their client. And what's been interesting to me as a coach is the feedback I get from the therapist, who will say something like, "That's so interesting. You focus more on what is working, or on the person's strengths. We're not looking at what's not working so much." So that was an interesting piece of feedback for me. The populations that I serve are senior leaders and high functioning teams, midlife women and beyond, and mature women who want to create equine guided practice. So I do corporate groups and individual clients, mostly midlife women, workshops as well for them, and then the teaching at this point. And I don't put my shingle out for mental health at all. But like I said, if that's involved and with an actual living engaged client, then I'm in touch with a therapist. And the way I screen clients actually, or how do I get, how do they know?
2 minutes.
My marketing materials, how I talk about it, like I just said, the high functioning teams, midlife women in transition, and people who want to start an equine practice, usually mature women in a second career. I do use support staff when I'm doing groups and co-facilitators like some of the others. I want to bring this in. We talk about these services and what's our expertise. And do we refer to a therapist? But here's the thing, therapists refer to other therapists. Not everybody does all kind of therapy. Not every coach does all kind of coaching. So you might have a therapist who's works with chemical dependency, and you've got somebody with chronic depression, so they may refer to someone else. I may have someone who came in for corporate leadership training, and they want to write a book, actually. So I will refer to a writing coach. So that's another whole aspect of this, just to broaden out for ourselves, that there are so many ways to refer. And there are so many experts out there, that this idea that, Blair brought up and others of, being present, we have to be present to the horses and present to our client. And the day we're not, then we turn in our cards. That's been my joke. I've got to turn in my card if I'm not present, fully present, to see what's going on and what's needed in that moment.
You have a little under a minute.
Okay. So as far as ongoing training, has been well said, those three things: horse skills, human skills, and horse-human interaction skills. That's what I call them. And then I think it's really important for us in EAL to be trauma informed. And also joining all kinds of, we've got the groups online, attend conferences, read, and talk to each other and listen to each other.
Thanks so much, Lynn. I love that, what you just said at the end, talk to each other and listen to each other. So important. And thanks so much for all the key points you mentioned, but like how in your services, you're focusing on what is working, and it's very strength-based. And I guess for me, what I'm taking away from the four of you is how important intake is, and how in that intake you kind of get really clear on whether you can meet that client's needs, how important it is that you define your services. And like Lynn just said, her marketing's really clear. That you all mentioned being present moment and moving forward. Blair spoke about having that collaborative continuity of care, and Judy mentioned that too, how she checks in afterwards. You all spoke about competencies and how that's like a lifetime thing, that you're constantly updating your competencies and getting supervision and mentorship and getting training from different training providers. You all mentioned that you're really mindful of the horse's welfare and choice, and that you're constantly checking in about where people are at and making them safe. The importance of being clear on your scope of practice. You all spoke about the importance of being present and embodiment, how important that is as well. So, and Lynn, I'm really grateful that you mentioned being trauma informed and how important that is, because I think that's hugely important. So thank you all so much. I'm really grateful for all that you brought. I'm just going to hand over to Carly.
Yeah, we just have just a moment. I also want to recognize that almost all of you mentioned at one point or another curiosity and being in moments with curiosity, which is something that tricks me really personally, because we were just speaking with my own personal therapist yesterday, and she was speaking to the quality of curiosity as kind of a measurement of self-regulation, and that when you can be in a place from curiosity, that it tends to be a cue that you are in a more regulated state. So I find that fascinating, that as all of you are speaking about being with well people, that you're also speaking about, you know, embodying being in the space of self-regulation. So we just have just a couple of minutes. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? And if not, I do have one, but I want to give everybody else. I don't know if I'm the person to be in this role, because I'll have questions if nobody else does. All right, with 1 minute left, I am going to steal it. I have a question about specificness of your modality. Each of you guys speak to like this really broad ability or amount of services you're providing, and the ability for clients to kind of come to you and select their services. So I'm curious as to whether or not it's possible for a provider in an EAL role to provide limited services, especially as they're like new. Can you say like, I'm only bringing equines into my Reiki part of my practice, or like how specific can that be, or does it always need to look kind of broad?
Yeah, I'd say totally can be specific. And you know, when I started out, you know, I was more narrow in my focus. And I think people should be, ideally, until they get into their zone, because, you know, I came from years of being a riding for the disabled, like path instructor and training coaches and working with all sorts of clients, worked with children because I had ponies and that's what people kept doing. And I knew I wanted to work with adults and tie in that world. But, you know, in my whole spiritual journey and my journey led by the horses in my development of this, I then kind of didn't want to work with corporate anymore and started doing the spiritual stuff. And then I came back to the corporate when I realized that I could sow seeds with people who have the power to change.
I don't know if any of you have seen the consensus document that Path and other individuals have put together, but within the learning environment, they've actually itemized it. I've got it here in front of me. It's equine assisted learning in education, equine assisted learning in organization, equine assisted learning in personal development. So I think within those headings, you could quite easily differentiate what your offering is. without confusing everybody using all the old anachronisms or acronyms or whatever they're called, simply because you're trying to define yourself as being different. And of course, actually, we're not that different because of what we're doing. But I forget who said it, but somebody said, of course, we bring part of ourselves to this work. So I think in that sense, we can differentiate. And I think that part is really important in terms of your marketing. What is it, what is it that you do and where do you sit? And starting small and broadening out is no big problem, but also specializing and just doing one thing really well works too.
I really appreciate that, both of you, very much.
I know we're running out of time, but just thinking about those competencies and what you need to kind of be a competent EAL facilitator. Everybody does bring their own specialty or their own passion into the work, and that's where you begin and that's where you find your focus. And if you want to branch out and you don't have those competencies, that's when you bring in a subject matter expert. You bring in a co-facilitator to work with you to fill the gaps. So if you are under, let's say your focus is on education and you want to bring somebody in under that organizational development umbrella and you'd like to do a corporate group because somebody gave you an opportunity, then you bring in a subject matter expert to co-facilitate with you and to be able to fill that. So there's ways too that you can still meet those competencies necessary to meet the needs of the group, but grow yourself and get that experience.
Love that, Blair. I guess we are having to be done. It goes so fast. That was just utterly and absolutely delightful. I just want to give you guys all a big hug. That was really beautiful and so much insight. Good. I took, pages of notes, which we will be able to kind of talk about and then get back out onto the group and pass along to the people that weren't able to watch and, post this video so folks can hear you guys and hear your wisdom and all the wonderful knowledge you shared with us today. So boy, thank you so much to our panelists. That was really, really a treat. And thank you so much to Jane and Callie for your beautiful facilitation. And thank you to our audience for being here and being with us as we explore these questions with an open heart and with that curiosity and the desire to keep learning as we're continuing learning, right? As we talked about today. So thank you all. And without further ado, we will see you. Actually, I think we have another panel next week. I think it's finally coming together. So same time, same place next week. I'm really excited for that too. So we'll look forward to seeing anybody who can join us then on the same topic. So thank you all very much. And panelists, if you want to stay for a couple seconds afterwards to debrief a little, do that. And we'll just ask everyone else to go ahead and drop off at this point. And thank you all so much. It was